The first sign that something was terribly wrong wasn't a phone call or an argument. It was a photograph. My wife, Margaret, walked into the kitchen carrying the morning mail while I was finishing my coffee. We'd been married for 42 years, and I knew every expression she could make. The moment she opened that envelope, the color drained from her face. She didn't scream. She didn't ask any questions. She just stared. Then she slowly pulled out an old photograph and placed it on the table between us. It was our wedding picture from 1982, the same 4x6 print we had given our son Ryan years earlier when he got married. It had always sat on the mantel in his living room. Except now something was different. Someone had carefully cut my wife's face out of the picture. Not torn, not damaged by accident. Cut. A perfect, deliberate oval where her smiling face had once been. Margaret's hands trembled so badly that she nearly dropped the photograph. Without saying a word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen. I picked up the envelope. No return address. The postmark showed it had been mailed from Omaha 3 days earlier. I looked down at the picture again. The cut was too clean to be random. Someone had taken their time. Someone had planned this. I found Margaret sitting on the edge of our bed staring at the wall. "It's her, isn't it?" she asked quietly. I already knew who she meant. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa. For 3 years, Vanessa had been slowly trying to erase my wife from our family. At first, the signs were subtle. Family group messages that somehow never included Margaret. Pictures posted online where Margaret was conveniently cropped out. Holiday dinners where Vanessa interrupted her every time she tried to speak. Little things. Things that were easy to explain away. Things our son always defended. "She's under pressure. You're reading too much into it. She doesn't mean anything by it." I heard those excuses so often I could repeat them myself. But then the behavior became impossible to ignore. The previous Christmas, Margaret had worn a simple red dress she loved. Vanessa looked at her and laughed. "That's a little ambitious for someone your age, don't you think?" Everyone heard it. Nobody said anything, especially Ryan. A few months later, during Ryan's birthday dinner, Vanessa arranged the seating. Margaret was placed alone at a small side table while the rest of the family sat together. When I asked why, Vanessa claimed there wasn't enough room. There were 5 empty chairs at the main table. Then came the family reunion photos, 27 pictures posted online. Margaret appeared in nearly half of the originals. Vanessa removed her from every single one before posting them. Every time I confronted Ryan, he defended his wife. Every single time. But this was different. Someone had taken our wedding photograph, removed my wife's face, and mailed it directly to us. That wasn't stress. That wasn't carelessness. That was hatred. My phone rang. Ryan. I answered immediately. "Hey, Dad," he said casually. "Just checking in. Everything okay?" I glanced toward the bedroom where Margaret was still sitting in silence. "Ryan," I said, "did Vanessa send us something recently?" There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "We received our wedding photo today." Another pause. "Okay. Someone cut your mother's face out of it." The silence that followed told me more than words ever could. Not shock, not confusion, calculation. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I'm sure there's an explanation." "The photo came from your house," I said. "The one we gave you when you got married. Do you still have it?" "I'd have to look." "You'd have to look." "Dad, you're jumping to conclusions." "Am I? Vanessa wouldn't do something like that." "Then who did?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gave me the same excuse he'd been using for years. "She's been emotional lately." That sentence finally broke something inside me. Someone had mutilated a wedding photograph and mailed it to us, and my son was still protecting her. I ended the call. When I walked back into the bedroom, Margaret looked up. "What did he say?" "He defended her." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected nothing else. Then she looked down at her hands. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel." The pain in her voice hit harder than the photograph itself. "I can't keep being pushed out of my own family." I sat beside her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I stood up. "I need to make a call." I walked into my office, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out a business card. The name printed on it was Samuel Harper, the attorney who had built our estate plan 15 years earlier. And before the day was over, one signature was going to change everything. Samuel answered on the second ring. Daniel, it's been a while. What can I do for you? I need to update my trust immediately. His voice became serious. What kind of update? I looked at the damaged wedding photo lying on my desk. I want Vanessa removed completely. There was a brief silence. That's a major change. I know. Are you certain? My wife received our wedding picture today with her face cut out of it. Another pause. Then Samuel sighed. My God. Can you prepare the paperwork today? Give me a few hours. Be here at 3. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting across from him in his conference room. Stacks of documents were neatly arranged on the table. Samuel had practiced estate law for decades, and even he looked disturbed after hearing the entire story. He slid the first document toward me. This amendment removes Vanessa Carter from every contingent beneficiary provision. I read every line carefully. Our estate included our home, investment accounts, retirement funds, and 3 rental properties. The total value was a little over $1.4 million. Originally, everything was divided equally between our son Ryan and our daughter Melissa. But there was a provision. If something happened to Ryan before Margaret and me passed away, his share would flow through to his wife, Vanessa. That provision was about to disappear. What happens now? I asked. Samuel pointed to a paragraph. If Ryan dies before you and Margaret, his share goes directly to his children. No access for Vanessa? None. What if Margaret and I die together? Same result. What if Ryan dies and the children are still minors? Melissa becomes trustee until they're old enough. And Vanessa? Nothing. I sat back in my chair. For the first time all day, I felt a small sense of relief. Good. Samuel folded his hands. Have you spoken to Ryan? He knows what happened. And? He called it a misunderstanding. That answer seemed to tell Samuel everything he needed to know. He turned the paperwork toward me. Then sign. I signed every page, 3 signatures, a few initials, less than 5 minutes. And just like that, Vanessa lost access to an inheritance she had likely been counting on for years. But I wasn't finished. There's something else, I said. Samuel looked up. The rental properties. What about them? Ryan and Vanessa are living in one of them. The arrangement had started years earlier. Instead of paying rent, they handled maintenance and repairs. At the time, it seemed like a good way to help them get ahead financially. Now I saw it differently. Can that arrangement be terminated? Samuel grabbed a legal pad. Month-to-month agreement? Yes. Then absolutely. No penalties? None. 30 days notice. Prepare the paperwork. He nodded. Consider it done. A few hours later, everything was finalized. The trust amendments were filed. The rental termination notices were drafted. The legal protections were in place. By 4:30 that afternoon, the entire future Vanessa had been building in her head had vanished. When I got home, Margaret was making tea. Her eyes were still red from crying. It's done, I told her. She looked up. What is? Vanessa has been removed from the estate. The cup nearly slipped from her hand. Daniel, if something happens to Ryan, the children inherit directly. What about Vanessa? She gets nothing. Margaret stared at me for several seconds. Ryan is going to be furious. Ryan had 3 years to stop this. She lowered her eyes. What about the grandchildren? They're fully protected. That answer seemed to ease her mind. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered a single word. Good. That one word carried years of hurt, years of humiliation, years of feeling invisible. That evening, our daughter Melissa called. She had stopped by earlier and seen the photograph. Mom was shaking when I got there, she said. I know. Dad, tell me Vanessa didn't really do this. I wished I could. Instead, I told her the truth. Melissa was quiet for several seconds. Then she said exactly what I had been thinking. That's abuse. Yes. And Ryan defended her? Immediately. She let out a long breath. I've watched her do this to Mom for years. You noticed? Everybody noticed. The answer stunned me. Then why didn't anyone say anything? Because every time someone brought it up, Ryan made excuses. Her voice softened. I should have spoken up sooner. This isn't your fault. Maybe not, she said, but I still feel guilty. I understood exactly what she meant. After we hung up, I sat alone in my office. The damaged wedding photograph was still sitting on my desk. I stared at the empty space where my wife's face had once been. Then I started thinking about something I hadn't considered before. 3 years earlier, Vanessa had suddenly become interested in our finances. She had started asking questions about investments, about rental income, about retirement plans. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now it looked very different. The kindness she briefly showed Margaret back then hadn't been genuine. It had been strategic. She wasn't trying to build a relationship. She was studying her future. And somewhere along the way, she started viewing my wife as an obstacle that needed to disappear. At exactly 8 that night, my phone rang again. Ryan. And this conversation would reveal a truth he never intended to say out loud. The moment I answered, I could tell Ryan already knew. His voice was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're trying very hard not to lose their temper. Dad, I talked to Vanessa. I leaned back in my chair. Did you? She says she didn't send the photo. Of course she does. She's upset that you'd accuse her of something like this. I glanced at the damaged photograph lying beside me. The empty hole where Margaret's face used to be seemed almost larger now. Ryan, where is your copy of that picture? A pause, then another. I don't know. You don't know? We packed some things away a few months ago. Convenient. Dad, you're acting like you've already convicted her. No, I'm looking at evidence. The only evidence you have is a photo that showed up in the mail. Our wedding photo. Another silence. Then Ryan spoke again. What did you mean earlier when you said this was the final straw? I already knew where this conversation was going, but I answered anyway. I went to see Samuel today. The silence on the other end became immediate. Heavy. What for? I updated the trust. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, nervous. What does that mean? It means Vanessa is no longer a beneficiary under any circumstances. Nothing, not a single word, just breathing. Then finally, you did what? I removed her completely. Dad, the house, the investments, the rental properties, everything. You can't do that. I already did. His breathing grew heavier. You didn't even talk to us. I spent 3 years talking to you. That's not fair. Fair? I asked quietly. Your wife cut your mother's face out of our wedding photograph. We don't know that. I closed my eyes. The denial was almost impressive at this point. Ryan, stop. No, Dad. You're making decisions based on assumptions. I'm making decisions based on patterns. Patterns? 3 years of humiliating your mother. Vanessa never... Don't. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Don't sit there and tell me I imagined it. Ryan fell silent, because he knew I hadn't. He had seen it all. Every cruel comment, every exclusion, every insult disguised as a joke, every family event where Margaret was treated like an unwanted guest. He had witnessed all of it, and he had chosen silence every single time. Then he said something he immediately regretted. But we've been planning around that inheritance. The words slipped out before he could stop them. I sat perfectly still. Slowly, I repeated them. You've been planning around it. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Dad, everybody plans financially. Everybody plans around their parents dying. That's not what I said. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was sad. For years I had suspected that money was part of this. Now Ryan had confirmed it himself. Maybe not intentionally, but he had confirmed it. You've been counting on assets that don't belong to you. We've been planning responsibly. You've been counting on my death. Stop twisting my words. I'm repeating them. Ryan exhaled loudly. I could hear frustration building. Dad, this is going to destroy the family. No. I stared again at the mutilated wedding photo. Your wife already did that. The line went quiet. Then he asked a question that told me exactly how worried he was. What happens now? The trust stays exactly the way it is. And Vanessa gets nothing. You can't seriously be doing this. I am. What about our future? There it was again. Not concern for his mother, not concern for the family, the future, the money, the plans. I suddenly understood something. Ryan wasn't shocked because I was angry. He was shocked because the financial future he and Vanessa had built in their minds had disappeared, a future neither of them had earned, a future they had simply expected. You should have thought about that before allowing your wife to treat your mother the way she has. The call ended shortly afterward, not with resolution, not with understanding, just silence. When I walked into the living room, Margaret was waiting. She had clearly heard enough of the conversation to understand what happened. He admitted it, didn't he? I nodded. He admitted they've been counting on the inheritance. Margaret closed her eyes. For a moment she looked older than I had ever seen her. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that comes from years of disappointment. What have we done, Daniel? I sat beside her. We protected you. She looked away. But at what cost? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Because neither of us knew that this was only the beginning. Within days, the phone calls would stop. The accusations would start. And Vanessa would launch a counterattack neither of us saw coming. The fallout started almost immediately. First, Ryan disappeared. No calls, no texts, no emails, nothing. It was as if Margaret and I had suddenly ceased to exist. Then Vanessa began reaching out. At first it was phone calls, 5 in 2 days. I ignored every one of them. When the calls failed, the messages started. We need to talk. You're overreacting. This is all based on a misunderstanding. Margaret is manipulating you. You're destroying this family. The final message made me put my phone down and walk away. Think about your grandson. That crossed a line. Vanessa didn't get to use 16-year-old Tyler as leverage. Not after everything she'd done. 4 days later, they showed up at our front door. I was organizing tools in the garage when I heard the bell ring. Margaret answered. Within seconds, I heard Vanessa's voice, loud, confident, determined. I walked into the foyer. Vanessa stood there wearing a cream-colored sweater and an expression carefully designed to look reasonable. Ryan stood behind her with his hands shoved into his pockets. He looked exhausted. Daniel, Vanessa began, we need to clear this up. You need to leave. Please, just 5 minutes. No. Her expression tightened. I didn't send that photograph. I stared at her. For years, I had watched her manipulate conversations. Every accusation became someone else's fault. Every cruel act became a misunderstanding. Every consequence became victimization. Now she was trying it again. I know things have been difficult between Margaret and me, she said. But mailing something like that? I would never do that. For a brief moment, I understood why people believed her. She sounded convincing, calm, measured, almost sincere. Then I remembered my wife's shaking hands, the empty space in the photograph, the years of humiliation, and the doubt vanished. You've spent 3 years trying to erase my wife from this family. Her face hardened slightly. That's ridiculous. Is it? I stepped forward. You excluded her from family events. That's not true. You cropped her out of pictures. Those were accidents. You seated her away from the family. There wasn't enough room. There were empty chairs. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I could see the mask beginning to crack. What about the comments? I asked. The jokes about her age. I was teasing. The insults about her clothes. I was being honest. The constant interruptions every time she spoke. You're exaggerating. Every answer sounded exactly like I expected. Nothing was ever her fault. Nothing was ever intentional. Everything was always someone else's misunderstanding. Finally, her patience snapped. The shift was subtle, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a colder tone, a harder edge. So that's it? She asked. You're taking away our future because Margaret can't handle criticism? The words hung in the air. Even Ryan looked uncomfortable. This isn't criticism, I said. This is cruelty. Vanessa laughed, actually laughed. I think you've been looking for an excuse. I felt Margaret stiffen beside me. You never wanted Ryan to have any of that money. There it was. The inheritance. Again. Everything always led back to the money. You think this is about control, Vanessa continued. You can't stand the idea that your son has his own life, so you're punishing him. No. I looked directly at her. I'm protecting my wife. The room went quiet. Then Ryan finally spoke. Dad. I turned toward him. He looked miserable. But not miserable enough to stand up to his wife. Not miserable enough to tell the truth. Not miserable enough to choose his mother. You're making a mistake. I stared at him for several seconds. Then I asked the question I already knew he couldn't answer. Where is the photograph, Ryan? His eyes dropped immediately. There was my answer. Not words, not explanations, just silence. The same silence I'd heard during our phone calls. The same silence I'd heard every time Vanessa mistreated Margaret. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Hard. We're leaving. Good. Because I was finished listening. As they walked toward the door, Vanessa turned back one last time. You'll regret this. Maybe she expected fear. Maybe she expected hesitation. Instead, I simply answered, No. You will. They left. The front door closed behind them, and for a moment the house became completely silent. Then I looked at Margaret. Her face was pale. Her eyes were filled with tears. Did you hear what she called me? She whispered. I nodded. Overly sensitive. The words clearly hurt more than she wanted to admit. Like all the years of disrespect had somehow become her fault. Like she was the problem. Like she deserved what had happened. I sat beside her and took her hand. You're not the problem. She didn't answer. Instead, tears began sliding down her cheeks. Quiet tears. The worst kind. Not angry, not dramatic. Just heartbreak. I think I've lost him, she whispered. I knew exactly who she meant. Our son. And for the first time, I wasn't sure she was wrong. Over the next several weeks, the distance became complete. Ryan stopped responding to every attempt at communication. Family gatherings vanished. The group chats went silent. Even Tyler stopped visiting. A tradition we'd enjoyed for years suddenly ended without explanation. Later, Melissa told us why. Vanessa had told Tyler that things were complicated, that it was better to stay away until everyone calmed down. As if this were a temporary disagreement. As if years of cruelty hadn't led us here. As if none of it mattered. But while our side of the family sat in silence, Vanessa was busy. She was calling relatives, talking to cousins, contacting aunts and uncles, building a narrative. And by Christmas, she had convinced some of them that Margaret and I were the villains. The war was no longer happening inside the family. Now it was spreading beyond it. And the next move Vanessa made would be far more dangerous than anything she had done before. January arrived with bitter cold weather and even colder news. Melissa called one evening. The tension in her voice told me something was wrong before she said a single word. Dad, you need to sit down. I was already seated in my office. What happened? There was a pause. Then she said it. Vanessa filed a report against you. For a moment I thought I had misheard. A report? With Adult Protective Services. I stared at the wall. What? She's claiming you're suffering from cognitive decline. The room suddenly felt smaller. Excuse me? Melissa exhaled heavily. She's telling people that Mom is manipulating you financially. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're serious. Completely. She's saying I changed my estate plan because I'm mentally impaired? Yes. And Ryan? Another pause. He cooperated with them. That hurt more than the accusation itself. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Then anger replaced shock. I manage 3 rental properties. I know. I handle every investment account. I know. I've never missed a bill payment in my life. I know, Dad. Then how can anyone believe this nonsense? Because she's building a case. The words sent a chill through me. A case. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was strategy. If Vanessa could convince people that I wasn't mentally competent, she might be able to challenge every change I'd made to the trust, every amendment, every protection, everything. When did this happen? I asked. Last week. I leaned back in my chair. The lengths she was willing to go were becoming terrifying. A photograph had become a legal attack. and now she was trying to use government agencies against us. 2 days later, someone knocked on our front door. I already knew why they were there. The woman introduced herself as Rebecca Lawson, professional, polite, tablet in hand. She explained she was following up on a report concerning my well-being. I invited her inside. For nearly an hour, she asked questions. My age, my health, my medications, my finances, my daily routines. Who handled our money? Who made financial decisions? Whether I felt pressured by anyone. Whether I felt safe in my own home. The questions didn't bother me. What bothered me was knowing why they were being asked, because somewhere someone had tried to paint me as a vulnerable old man being controlled by his wife. Eventually, I couldn't help myself. Did my daughter-in-law file this report? Rebecca remained professional. I can't discuss the source of the complaint. That wasn't an answer, but it was enough. The interview continued. At the end, she closed her tablet and smiled politely. Mr. Walker, I don't see any indication of cognitive impairment. I almost laughed. Imagine that. She smiled slightly. You appear fully capable of managing your own affairs. Thank you. I'll be closing the investigation. The relief was immediate, but it didn't last, because after she left, Margaret said something that stayed with me. She's not finished. I looked at her. What do you mean? Margaret folded her arms. People like Vanessa don't stop when they lose. I knew she was right. The failed investigation wasn't the end. It was simply another move that hadn't worked. The next move would be different, maybe smarter, maybe more dangerous. So I started documenting everything, every message, every phone call, every accusation, every interaction. I created folders, saved screenshots, printed emails, made notes, dates, times, witnesses, everything. Because for the first time I realized we weren't dealing with family conflict anymore. We were dealing with someone who saw people as obstacles, and obstacles were meant to be removed. 3 weeks later, something happened that changed everything. On a freezing Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I froze. Tyler stood on the porch, alone. My 16-year-old grandson looked miserable. His hands were shoved into his jacket pockets. His eyes were red. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "can I come in?" 5 minutes later, he was sitting at our kitchen table. Margaret made him hot chocolate like she always had. For a while, he said nothing. Then he finally looked up. "Mom told me I shouldn't come here." I exchanged a glance with Margaret. "Why?" Tyler stared into his cup. "She says you're dangerous." The words hit me like a punch. "Dangerous?" "She says Grandma is controlling you." Margaret closed her eyes. I could see the pain on her face. "Tyler," I said gently, "do I seem dangerous to you?" "Of course not." "Then why are you here?" His answer changed everything, because he leaned forward and lowered his voice. I heard something. The seriousness in his tone immediately got my attention. "What did you hear?" He swallowed hard. Then he looked directly at me. "I heard Mom talking about your money." My stomach tightened. "What about it?" Tyler hesitated, as if he was deciding whether he should continue. Then he finally spoke. "She talks about it all the time." Margaret and I exchanged another glance. "What does she say?" I asked. Tyler's answer would expose a truth neither Ryan nor Vanessa wanted us to know. Tyler wrapped both hands around the mug and stared down at the steam rising from it. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether he should continue. Then he took a deep breath. "Mom talks about what she's going to do when she gets Grandpa's properties." The room went completely silent. Margaret slowly set down her cup. "What do you mean?" I asked. Tyler looked uncomfortable. "She talks about selling this house." I felt my jaw tighten. "This house?" He nodded. "She said it's too old and worth more as real estate than as a home." Margaret looked away. I could see the hurt on her face. 42 years of memories lived inside these walls. To Vanessa, it was just an asset, just money. "What else?" I asked. Tyler hesitated. "She talks about the rental properties too." "How?" "Like they're already hers." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. Tyler wasn't describing plans. He was describing expectations. Vanessa wasn't hoping for an inheritance. She had already spent it in her mind. "Does your dad know she talks like this?" I asked. "Yeah." Margaret flinched. "And what does he say?" Tyler shrugged. "Mostly nothing." That answer hurt more than I expected, because silence had always been Ryan's greatest failure. Not cruelty, not manipulation, cowardice. The willingness to watch something wrong happen and do nothing. After Tyler left that afternoon, I immediately called Samuel. I told him everything. The APS complaint, the failed investigation, Tyler's visit, the inheritance conversations, the growing pattern. Samuel listened quietly. Then he spoke. "Document all of it." "I already am." "Good. If she challenges the trust later, every detail matters." I leaned back in my chair. "Samuel, she's not going to stop." "No." His answer came immediately. People who believe they're entitled to something rarely walk away peacefully. That conversation stayed with me, because deep down I knew he was right. Vanessa wasn't fighting because she was hurt. She was fighting because she believed something had been taken from her, something she had never owned in the first place. The next 2 months passed quietly. Too quietly. And that worried me. People like Vanessa didn't disappear. They regrouped. Then one afternoon in March, something happened that changed the entire situation. I was shopping for groceries when I ran into our longtime neighbor, Linda Parker. She had lived 2 houses down from us for nearly 20 years. After a few minutes of small talk, her expression became serious. "Daniel, can I tell you something?" "Of course." She glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. I should have said something a long time ago. Immediately, I knew she was talking about Vanessa. "What is it?" Linda sighed. "Last Thanksgiving." I waited. I saw how she treated Margaret. My attention sharpened instantly. "What happened?" Linda looked embarrassed. "I was at your house helping with dessert." I remembered. "Margaret wasn't sitting at the table." "No." Linda shook her head. "She was eating alone in the kitchen." I froze. The memory came rushing back. I had been outside helping Ryan move something from his truck. I hadn't seen it happen. "There were empty seats at the table," Linda continued. "I counted them." I said nothing. "Vanessa told Margaret there wasn't enough room." My hands tightened around the shopping cart. Linda looked genuinely upset. "I should have said something." "You couldn't have known." "Yes, I could." Her voice cracked slightly. "I saw it." For years, Vanessa had made us feel like we were imagining things, like we were being sensitive, like we were misunderstanding her intentions. Now an outsider was confirming everything. Someone with no stake in the conflict, someone who had witnessed it firsthand. When I got home, I told Margaret. For the first time in months, I saw something shift in her expression. Validation, relief, proof. Proof that she wasn't crazy. Proof that she hadn't imagined any of it. Proof that the cruelty had been real. Then April arrived, and with it came the phone call that finally exposed the truth. I was sitting in my office when Melissa's number appeared on my screen. The moment I answered, I heard Tyler's voice. "Grandpa, don't hang up." My heart immediately started racing. "Tyler, what's wrong?" "Mom blocked your number on my phone." I closed my eyes. Of course she had. "Why?" "She says you're trying to turn me against her." I rubbed my forehead. The manipulation never stopped, not even with her own son. "Tyler, listen to me. None of this is your fault." "I know." But his voice sounded shaken, scared, like he was carrying a burden no teenager should have to carry. Then he said something that made me sit up straight. "Grandpa." "What?" I heard them arguing. The tone of his voice changed, lower, more serious. "I heard Mom and Dad fighting one night." Every instinct told me to listen carefully. "What were they fighting about?" Tyler swallowed. Then he said the words that would finally destroy every lie Vanessa had spent months telling. They were fighting about the photograph. I stopped breathing. For a moment, neither Margaret nor I moved. Then I asked the question that mattered most. "What did you hear, Tyler?" And his answer was about to give us the proof we had been missing from the very beginning. I gripped the phone tighter. "What exactly did you hear?" Tyler lowered his voice even further. "I couldn't hear everything." "Tell me what you did hear." There was a pause. Then he spoke. "Mom said Grandma deserved it." Every muscle in my body went rigid. Across the room, Margaret froze. What else? I asked carefully. Tyler took a shaky breath. They were arguing in the kitchen. Dad was telling her to keep her voice down. My heart was pounding now. And then? Mom said she wasn't sorry. The room seemed to disappear around me. For months, Ryan and Vanessa had denied everything. Every accusation, every suspicion, every question. And now Tyler was telling me she had admitted it. What were her exact words? I asked. Tyler didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She said Grandma deserved what happened. Margaret covered her mouth. Tears instantly filled her eyes. I could barely keep my own voice steady. Are you absolutely sure? Yes. Then Tyler said something that changed everything. I recorded it. For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. You what? I recorded part of the argument on my phone. My pulse surged. You have a recording? Yeah. Tyler. I was scared to send it. I stood up so quickly my chair nearly tipped over. Do you still have it? Yes. Can you send it to Melissa? A few seconds passed. Then Tyler answered. Okay. The next 10 minutes felt longer than the previous 6 months. I paced around my office. Margaret sat silently on the couch. Neither of us spoke. Finally, my phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. Audio file attached. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I pressed play. At first there was background noise, footsteps, dishes, a television somewhere in another room. Then Vanessa's voice became clear, cold, sharp, unmistakable. She deserved it. Margaret gasped. I kept listening. Vanessa continued. Your mother acts like she's the center of everything. There was a pause, then another sentence, one I would never forget. When your father dies, I'll be the one everyone comes to. My blood ran cold. Ryan's voice followed, quieter, nervous. You can't say things like that where Tyler might hear. Then Vanessa laughed, actually laughed. I don't care who hears. The recording continued, every word exposing more than the last, every sentence confirming what Margaret and I had known all along. Vanessa wasn't simply being rude, she wasn't stressed, she wasn't misunderstood. She was intentionally trying to push Margaret out of the family, and Ryan knew it. He had known the entire time. The recording ended. The room fell silent. Margaret was crying, not loudly, just tears slowly running down her face. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked at me. He knew. I nodded. Yes. All this time? Yes. She stared at the floor. Every excuse Ryan had made, every defense, every denial, every conversation, all of it collapsed in a single moment. Because now we had proof, not suspicions, not assumptions. Proof. I immediately called Samuel. He answered on the second ring. Daniel, I have evidence. His tone changed instantly. What kind of evidence? An audio recording. I explained everything. Tyler, the argument, the admission, the recording. Samuel listened carefully. When I finished, he was silent for several seconds. Then he said exactly what I expected. Save multiple copies. I already am. Email one to yourself. Done. Send one to me. I will. This changes everything. I looked at Margaret. For the first time in months, there was something different in her eyes. Not happiness, not relief, validation. The truth was finally visible. No more lies, no more excuses, no more pretending. That evening, I made a decision. I was done waiting, done arguing, done listening to excuses. Ryan needed to hear the recording, not over the phone, not through a message, in person. The next morning, I got in my truck and drove across town to Ryan's rental house. The house was smaller than the one they had lived in before. The lawn needed mowing. The paint was beginning to fade. The financial future Vanessa had expected was already disappearing. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. A few moments later, Ryan opened it. The moment he saw me, he looked uneasy. Dad? I held up my phone. We need to talk. His expression immediately darkened. What is this about? You'll find out in a minute. Ryan stepped outside and closed the door behind him. I unlocked my phone, opened the recording, and pressed play. Within seconds, the color disappeared from his face because he recognized Vanessa's voice immediately, and he knew exactly what was coming next. Ryan's eyes widened the moment Vanessa's voice came through the speaker. She deserved it. For a second, he looked like he might try to grab the phone. Instead, he just stood there, frozen, listening. The recording continued. "When your father dies, I'll be the one everyone comes to." I watched the blood drain from his face. His shoulders slumped. The confidence he'd carried for months vanished. The excuses vanished. The denial vanished. When the recording ended, neither of us spoke. Ryan stared at the ground. I waited. Finally, he whispered, "Where did you get that?" "Tyler." His eyes closed. "Oh, God. You knew." It wasn't a question. Ryan rubbed both hands over his face. For the first time in months, he looked completely defeated. "I knew she was angry." "You knew more than that." He didn't answer. Because there was no answer. The recording had destroyed every defense he had left. "She admitted it, Ryan." Silence. "She admitted everything." Still silence. Then finally he said the words I had been waiting to hear. "I should have stopped it." The admission didn't bring satisfaction, only sadness, because it was 6 months too late, 3 years too late, a lifetime too late. "Why didn't you?" Ryan leaned against the porch railing. His voice sounded exhausted. "Because every time I tried, she would turn it into a fight." I shook my head. "No." He looked up. "You didn't stay silent to avoid a fight." His expression tightened. "You stayed silent because it was easier." That hit him hard, because it was true. He looked away. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, Ryan said quietly, "I never thought it would go this far." I laughed bitterly. "You watched it go this far." He flinched. The truth hurt, but not nearly as much as what Margaret had endured. Mom didn't deserve any of it. "No, I know that." "No, Ryan." I stepped closer. "You know it now." His eyes filled with shame, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret. Not regret over the trust, not regret over the rental property, regret over his choices. The realization seemed to hit him all at once. Every holiday, every family dinner, every cruel remark, every time his mother had looked at him hoping he would say something, and every time he had failed her. "What happens now?" he asked. I stared at him, the same question he had asked months earlier. The answer hadn't changed. "That depends on you." "What does that mean?" "It means the future isn't my decision anymore." Ryan looked confused. I continued. "For years, your mother kept forgiving things she shouldn't have forgiven." I paused. "Now it's her choice." His shoulders sank. He understood immediately. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about Margaret, the person who had suffered through all of it, the person everyone expected to keep accepting it, the person nobody had protected. "Can I talk to Mom?" I thought about that. Then I answered honestly, "I don't know." His face fell, and for the first time I think he truly understood what he had lost. Not the inheritance, not the house, not the properties. His mother. The woman who had spent 39 years putting him first. The woman who had defended him every time he made mistakes. The woman who had loved him unconditionally. He had broken something inside her. And some things don't heal simply because someone finally admits they were wrong. I turned toward my truck. "Dad," I stopped. Ryan's voice cracked. "I'm sorry." I looked back at him. The apology sounded sincere. Maybe it was, but sincerity doesn't erase years of damage. "I know." Then I got in my truck and drove home. When I walked through the front door, Margaret was waiting in the kitchen. She immediately looked at my face. "What happened?" I sat down. He listened to the recording. "And?" He admitted he knew. Margaret closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. Not because she was surprised, because hearing it confirmed was somehow worse. "And Vanessa?" "Nothing has changed." Margaret nodded slowly, exactly what she expected. Then I told her something else. Ryan wants to talk to you." For several seconds, she said nothing. The kitchen was completely silent. Finally, she looked out the window toward the garden. The same garden she had planted when we bought the house decades ago. The same garden she had cared for through every season of our lives. "I don't know if I can." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't have to decide today." She squeezed my hand gently. For the first time in months, there was no anger in her eyes. Only exhaustion. The kind that comes after carrying pain for too long. Outside, the evening sun was beginning to set, and neither of us knew it yet. But the next decision Margaret made would determine whether our family had any chance of surviving at all. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing happened. No calls, no messages, no surprise visits. The silence felt strange after months of constant conflict. Part of me wondered if Ryan had finally accepted reality. Part of me knew better. One Sunday afternoon, Margaret and I were sitting on the back patio when Melissa arrived unexpectedly. The moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. She sat down across from us. "What happened?" I asked. Melissa sighed heavily. "Ryan left." Margaret froze. "What do you mean?" "He moved out." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Margaret whispered, "When?" 3 days ago." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What happened?" Melissa looked down at her hands. "The recording happened." I already knew it wasn't that simple. "Tell me." She nodded. "After you played it for him, Ryan confronted Vanessa." Neither Margaret nor I spoke. "He asked her directly if she sent the photo." "And?" Melissa gave a bitter laugh. "She admitted it." Margaret closed her eyes, not because she was surprised, because hearing it still hurt. "What else?" I asked. "Apparently they fought for hours." Melissa shook her head. "Years of problems came out all at once." I wasn't surprised. The photograph had never been the real issue. It had simply exposed everything underneath. The manipulation, the entitlement, the cruelty, the lies, all of it. Ryan finally told her she had gone too far. Margaret looked away. Too late. Far too late, but still something she probably never thought she would hear. "How did Vanessa react?" Melissa snorted. "Exactly how you'd expect. I already knew. Nothing was her fault. Nothing ever had been. She blamed everyone else." "Of course she did." "She blamed you." I nodded. "Expected." "She blamed Mom." Margaret's expression didn't even change. "Expected." "She blamed me." "Also expected." Melissa shook her head again. "According to Vanessa, everyone ruined her life except Vanessa." The three of us sat quietly. Then Melissa added something unexpected. She also admitted the inheritance mattered. My attention sharpened immediately. "What did she say?" Melissa looked directly at me. "She said she spent years believing that money would eventually belong to them." The words felt sickeningly familiar, because they matched exactly what Tyler had told us, exactly what Ryan had accidentally admitted, exactly what I had suspected from the beginning. She had built her future around assets she didn't own, and when those assets disappeared, everything else started collapsing. "What happened after that?" I asked. "Ryan packed a bag and left." Margaret looked genuinely shocked. "Just like that?" "Not exactly." Melissa hesitated. Then she continued. "They've been struggling financially for months." I wasn't surprised. The free housing was gone. The expected inheritance was gone. The fantasy future was gone. Reality had arrived, and reality was expensive. "Ryan's staying with a friend right now." Margaret stared into the distance. I knew what she was thinking. Not about money, not about Vanessa, about her son, the little boy she had raised, the teenager she had worried about, the young man she had believed would always do the right thing. Even after everything, she still loved him. That was the tragedy of being a parent. Love doesn't disappear just because someone disappoints you. "Has he called?" she asked quietly. Melissa nodded. "He wants to see you." The words hung in the air. For a long moment, Margaret didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Finally, she looked at me. Fear, hope, pain, all mixed together. "I don't know what to say to him." "You don't have to know." What if he apologizes? I answered honestly. Then you decide whether you're ready to hear it. Tears formed in her eyes. What if I'm not? Then you're not. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something important. Margaret finally understood that she didn't owe anyone forgiveness. Not immediately, not automatically, not simply because someone asked for it. The decision belonged to her, and only her. 3 days later, Ryan called. Not me. Margaret. She stared at the phone for nearly a minute before answering. I quietly left the room and gave her privacy. The conversation lasted almost an hour. When she finally came outside, her eyes were red. But there was something different about her. Something lighter. Not healed. Not happy. Just lighter. I sat beside her. How did it go? She looked out toward the garden. Then she smiled sadly. My son finally told me the truth. What truth? Her eyes filled with tears again. That he knew I was hurting. I closed my eyes. The simplest truths are often the most painful. He said he saw it for years. Neither of us spoke. He said every time he stayed quiet, he knew he was failing me. The words hit harder than any apology could, because they were honest. Brutally honest. Margaret wiped her eyes. At least he finally admitted it. I nodded. Sometimes the truth doesn't fix anything, but it stops the bleeding. And after everything our family had endured, that was the closest thing to healing we had seen in a very long time. Spring arrived slowly that year. The tulips Margaret planted every autumn finally began pushing through the soil. For the first time in months, there was a little more peace in our house. Not happiness, not normalcy, just peace. Ryan started calling occasionally. Short conversations, careful conversations, the kind people have when they're trying to rebuild something fragile. He and Margaret spoke every couple of weeks, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Neither of them discussed Vanessa very often. The wounds were still too fresh, but little by little they started talking about other things. Old memories, family stories, Tyler, life. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. It was simply two people trying to find their way back to each other. Then one evening in early May, Tyler showed up again. This time he looked different, lighter, relieved, as if a weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. We sat together on the back patio while Margaret prepared dinner. Mom's moving, he said. I wasn't surprised. Where? An apartment across town. I nodded. What about your dad? Tyler smiled slightly. He's not going with her. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Tyler looked at me. Grandpa? Yeah? Did you ever think this would happen? I looked out at the garden, at the house Margaret and I had built our lives in, at the years behind us. No, Tyler nodded. I didn't either. After dinner, he helped Margaret water the flowers. Watching them together filled me with a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride because Tyler had grown into a good young man despite everything. Sadness because so much damage could have been avoided if the adults in his life had made better choices. A few weeks later, Ryan asked if he could come by. Alone. Margaret spent the entire morning nervous. I could tell. She cleaned things that were already clean, rearranged things that didn't need rearranging, checked the clock every 10 minutes. When Ryan finally arrived, he looked older. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent months carrying regret. He sat across from Margaret at the kitchen table. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan did something I never expected. He cried. Not quietly, not politely. He broke. Years of guilt seemed to pour out of him all at once. I'm sorry, Mom. Margaret immediately started crying too, but neither of them interrupted the other. Ryan kept talking. I should have protected you. Margaret covered her mouth. I know. I should have said something. I know. I should have believed you. More tears. More silence. Then Ryan said the one thing Margaret needed to hear most. You never deserved any of it. The words seemed to break the last wall she had been carrying inside herself. Because for years she had questioned everything, wondered if she was too sensitive, wondered if she was imagining things, wondered if she was somehow responsible. Now her own son was finally telling her the truth. No, she wasn't the problem. She never had been. The conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. When it ended, neither of them was healed, but both were lighter. As Ryan prepared to leave, he stopped beside me. "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded. "That's fair. I just wanted her to know the truth." I looked at my son. For the first time in years, I saw accountability. Real accountability. Not excuses. Not explanations. Responsibility. And that mattered. Months passed. Summer arrived. The trust remained exactly as it was. The estate plan never changed. The rental properties remained under our control. Vanessa challenged nothing. Perhaps because she knew she would lose. Perhaps because she finally understood that no amount of manipulation could change the facts. Eventually, we heard she had moved to another state. Far away. A fresh start. Or maybe just a new audience. Either way, she was gone. The chapter had ended. One evening, nearly 18 months after the envelope arrived, I found Margaret in the garden planting new flowers. The setting sun painted everything gold. She looked peaceful. More peaceful than she had in years. I walked over and helped her stand. She smiled. "You know something?" "What?" "I'm glad you made that phone call." I knew exactly which one she meant. The call to Samuel. The call that changed everything. The call that protected her when nobody else would. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I'd do it again." She nodded. So would I. Together we walked back toward the house. The same garden, the same life we had built over 4 decades. Behind us, the flowers swayed gently in the evening breeze. Ahead of us, there was still uncertainty, still scars, still memories that hurt. But there was also truth. And sometimes truth is enough. Sometimes protecting the people you love costs more than you ever expected. Sometimes standing your ground breaks things that can never be fully repaired. But some lines have to be drawn. Some cruelties cannot be ignored. And some people are worth protecting no matter what the price may be. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us for more powerful stories of family, betrayal, justice, and redemption. See you in the next story.